I am born and raised in Eastern North Carolina in a small town called Maple Hill in Pender County, North Carolina, as the daughter of a laborer who made minimum wage most of her time working. As a first generation college student, I went to UNC undergrad, UNC at Chapel Hill School of Law, where I worked my way through college, from bagging groceries to working as a waitress, to working in retail. I'm someone with lived experiences and having grown up in a family that would be considered the working poor in North Carolina. Also, having been an attorney who spent many years representing employees across our state in labor and employment matters. Also, I have the political experience needed to get things done. In 2014, I was elected as the youngest county commissioner ever elected in Wake County's history. I made history again by being the youngest person in Wake County's history to ever wield the gavel as chair. With the support of voters across our state, I'll make history again in November by being elected as the first woman of color to ever serve on the North Carolina Council of State. But that's not the reason that I ask voters to vote for me. It's because I am the most qualified person on the ballot for labor commissioner.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it. So I want to ask you about the work you've done as an attorney advocating for workers. That gives you an interesting perspective on this job, and I want you to tell us how that informs your approach moving forward if you're elected.
For starters, I have a unique perspective when it comes to the types of concerns that workers have. Also, some of the challenges that they have in terms of working for a minimum wage. We know that the minimum wage has remained stagnant while the cost of living has increased, which is why I support increasing the minimum wage. Also, when it comes to issues related to accessing quality healthcare, we all know that although we are in the middle of the greatest public health crisis of many of our lifetimes, that we have hospitals across our state that are being sold or possibly being closed, and that Medicaid expansion would allow hundreds of thousands of people better access to healthcare. I personally know of people who ration their insulin. I personally know of people who cut their pills in half because of the cost of, accessing their medical care. While I would not have a direct vote on those things as Commissioner of Labor, I'm working very closely with folks who are running in key seats across our state to make sure that we elect like-minded legislators who will have a direct vote. And I'll also use my voice, as I have done in the past, from marching down Jones Street with educators in support of better pay, better working conditions for our educators. And in every year that I have been a Wake County Commissioner, I have voted to increase funding to the Wake County public school system. That is just a bit of insight in terms of the work that I've done related to workers' rights. I also served on the litigation team that helped save career status for educators who had it in North Carolina, as opposed to we were not able to maintain career status for those who were in the pipeline. So I have a very long record of workers' rights. Also, as a county commissioner, I'll mention three very important worker-friendly and family-friendly policies that I personally led on. One being the implementation of paid parental leave, the implementation of paid family illness leave, and a fair chance hiring ordinance. I also voted yes on providing a living wage to all of Wake County government's employees, as well as chaired the board at a time when we were considered by the Triangle Business Journal, I believe it was, as the healthiest employer here in the Triangle.
So we have sometimes been critical of the current labor commissioner on our editorial pages, but I'd like to hear your thoughts about the balance she has struck between protecting workers and protecting businesses' interests.
I do not believe the current commissioner has struck a balance at all when it comes to working with the business community and uplifting the voices of workers. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that I'm running, is to restore that balance. I'm someone who's worked very well with the business community and has served on the Raleigh Chamber Board of Directors, while at the same time making very clear that it's in the interest of workers and employers to ensure safe and healthy work environments. I'm someone who does not believe that we have to choose between being pro-labor or pro-worker or pro-business. It's very possible for us to lift up those voices and ensure both workers and businesses have a voice at the table so that we can work on finding solutions together. And unfortunately, it's been the voices of workers across our state that have not been included at the table under this current administration. And I could point out several areas of concerns that reflect that, from the fact that very few RETA claims have been processed or put forward. I hear complaints from lawyers all across our state that the Department of Labor is basically a do-nothing department. When you look at the number of wage and hour complaints that have resulted in dollars back in the pockets of workers, I very much believe there is much room for improvement in the Department of Labor.
So I have a couple stats that I want to read to you and tell me what you would think about this as a labor commissioner. So North Carolina workplace deaths rose to 53 last year, and that was a 25% increase over the previous year and a high for the decade. At the same time, injury and illness rates have steadily declined over this decade. So that seems like two contrary things. What do you make of that, and what would you do with that information as a labor commissioner?
One of the first things that I hope to address, whether it relates to injuries or deaths in the workplace, is prevention. Working with the business community to provide trainings and safety and health programming that would address these issues on the front end. I would much rather engage with the business on the front end long before someone is injured or long before someone dies in a workplace injury.
So there are programs that exist that do that in the state right now. Do you think they're not sufficient?
I do not think they are sufficient.
Okay. Ned?
The governor recently began to talk about an executive order to do something for meatpacking workers. And then the Commissioner of Labor and the Commissioner of Agriculture said that that was really something they'd had no authority over. Do you think you can do anything about conditions in poultry plants and meatpacking plants in North Carolina?
Well, other states have. And I'm well aware of that article where the headline was essentially something like Cooper backs down off of an executive order that was intended to protect farmers, many of whom are Hispanic or Latinx. We are all aware that COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on Black and brown people. And it's very unfortunate that Governor Cooper was not able to move forward with that executive order, which I support very much. One of the key things that I think could be very different right now would be ensuring that there are inspectors. When workers complain about unsafe work environments, that we send inspectors out to farms, out to plants. My mom worked in some of those same meatpacking plants across eastern North Carolina that were very much impacted by COVID, or meatpacking plants just like it. Having grown up in Pender County, many of my family members worked in various meatpacking plants across eastern North Carolina. So I very much understand the working conditions and the fact that sometimes there's an issue as it relates to social distancing. But it's very important that our employers understand the importance of following CDC guidelines by allowing for social distancing, ensuring compliance as it relates to wearing a mask. Virginia was the first state in the country to implement essentially an emergency temporary standard. It's unfortunate that right here in North Carolina that we have not done the same.
The EPA recently backed off a regulation that would have protected workers that were certain, agricultural workers that were being exposed to spraying that could have an effect on children or fetuses. chemical exposure is a problem in the workplace, not only in the fields, but most prominently in the fields. Is that an area which you'd be looking at in terms of chemical exposure in the water and spraying and workplace environments?
Absolutely. People, particularly who work on farms that are sprayed with chemicals, are more susceptible to other health conditions, including cancer. And I'll note that the EPA's position as it relates to climate change and environmental issues is reflective of the position of our current president. Just because the EPA made that decision does not mean that it is the right decision. I am someone who very much believes in climate change and very much believes that in science and the data, that when there are certain types of chemicals and exposure to those chemicals, that it can certainly have a long-term impact on the health of our workers and our working families.
North Carolina, of course, is a right to work state. Is that a good thing, or should we do something to allow workers to organize a little more than they are, even if they're not collective bargaining?
Right to work would be an issue that our North Carolina General Assembly would have to vote on. Depending on who you talk to, it's worked very well for some businesses. When you talk to workers, it's a concern. I very much believe in the importance of making sure that the voices of workers are at the table. So when I talk to employers, I very much encourage them to have a process for grievances, to make sure that they have an open door policy so that employees can make sure that they have a formal and established means of addressing their concerns in the workplace without fear of discipline or termination.
Thank you very much.
Jessica, is there anything that we have not asked you about that you would like our board to know?
Are there any other questions?
We don't have any other questions for you.
Wonderful.
Happy to hear anything else.
All right, there are just two areas in particular that I'd like to focus on. One being wage and hour, which is an area where I've been hearing particular complaints from workers across our state. And per my understanding, data shows that many of those cases do not result in additional monies being put back into the hands of workers. And I just want to remind people that this is about wages that are earned. I've heard, particularly from communities where English is not their first language, that they are particularly vulnerable to employers making promises about what they're going to get paid, and then they get their paycheck, and it doesn't reflect the amount that is agreed upon, and also doesn't always reflect a minimum wage, which I've noted. I very much believe in an increase in the minimum wage. But under my leadership, the Department of Labor will much more aggressively seek to recover wages that have been earned by workers across our state that they deserve, that they're entitled to, even if that means taking those cases to court. As an attorney, that is something that I'm very familiar with, and will use the fullest extent of the law to get those dollars back in the hands of workers who have earned those wages. Also, as it relates to RETA, Retaliatory Employment Discrimination Act, which falls under the Department of Labor. It's very important that, particularly right now in the middle of a global pandemic and health crisis, that when workers report concerns in the workplace, that they are protected from unnecessary and undue retaliation and or termination just because they have made clear that they have concerns in our workplace. Those are two very distinct areas where workers across our state will be able to feel the difference between having an attorney, having someone who believes in the concept of workers' rights. Those are things that are very distinct about my leadership that I believe workers will be able to feel